to start on some happy news. I think,
Okay.
it's been show's been such a downer. It's good to get some yucks.
We
in there.
are pretty depressing.
We are. Speaking of,
Hmm.
if you've ever looked at house prices recently and felt a little lightheaded, you'll want to sit down for this. The CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, released a sobering report this week with a number that's hard to wrap your head around: 4.8 million. That's how many new homes Canada needs to build over the next decade just to get affordability back to where it was in 2019. The new forecast essentially says we need to double our current pace of construction, a task that has been called both achievable, in quotes, funny enough.
It's probably fine.
How are you defining the word achievable? And a monumental challenge, no quotes.
There's a follow-up quote to the term achievable from their deputy chief economist here. But not without a significantly larger and modernized workforce, more private investment, less regulation, fewer delays, and lower development costs.
Achievable, but not without bending the laws of reality.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If we find,
Achievable if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.
make
Yes,
a wish,
exactly.
see what happens. Yeah.
Apparently, Ontario and Nova Scotia have the most significant housing supply gaps among provinces. Montreal faces the largest gap among cities, with Toronto needing a 70% increase in home building. 70%! That's incredible. God.
Exclamation.
So my personal favorite part of this is that they were originally targeting the 2004 affordability level.
Yeah.
And then they just were like, that's not happening. So we're going to adjust that to the 2019 affordability level. 2019, when everyone could afford a house. Like, ugh. And in 2023, they said that we need 3.5 additional housing units by 2030 on top of the 2.3 million or 3.5 million additional housing units on top of the 2.3 million that were already projected to be built to get back to the 2004 levels. And now they're just like, none of that's happening.
That's not going to happen.
But I mean, even the 2019, to me, it's not going to happen. There's just no possible way it's going to happen.
There's a lot of what ifs, right? I don't like it because my worry is that they're going to do, because like whenever we have housing booms, which we've had in the past, is you see, condo towers go up, you see houses go up, and they're made out of construction paper. Like they're not the quality houses, right? And so, if we're taking a lot of the standards away, is that a good thing? There's a lot of middle there that can disappear, I think, right? But I don't know.
Well, the other thing that's happening is because so much of this property is being owned by big corporations, by like real estate income trusts, they're waiting out pricing. In Toronto, condo sales in the first quarter were down 75%. In Vancouver, down 37%. And in Toronto, pre-construction inventory was 14% higher in the first quarter than in 2022. And it would take almost 6 years to sell it all at the current pace of deals. And the reason why it's happening is because these real estate income trusts aren't as price sensitive. They can just have a house sit on the market or place it on the market and say, if we're not getting what we say it's worth, we just won't sell it for less.
Sure.
Right. And so there's a ton of stock in the market right now that nobody can afford because the housing prices are just kind of stuck because the market is just waiting itself out right now. I guess you could say things are going great.
Well, and just not even the building of houses though, but like even the housing markets, like they're, because everything is a business, right? Capitalism, yay. There are houses that will be held back, right? So that other houses can be valued higher. Like it's such a gross type of industry where you are like really making money on the lives of people that require shelter. Like it's gross.
You want some horrifying numbers?
Oh yeah.
So,
God, we love
the
horrifying numbers.
CMHC target is supposed to be 30% of your income spent on housing. That's sort of this alleged sweet spot. We can argue about housing is human right and whether or not that's way too high. It is. But that's the target. In a business as usual scenario, in 2019, they projected that by 2035, it would go up to 40.3% of people's incomes. That was the projection in 2019. They've revised that now. By 2035, in a business as usual scenario, they're projecting that housing will become 52.7% of people's incomes. If we doubled housing starts, it would bring the figure down to 41.1% of income.
Jesus.
Like, nobody can afford a house. It's like, if you aren't already in the market, there's really, even with the most optimistic scenarios, like, how are you supposed to afford somewhere to live?
I don't get it. I know that like when Shannon and I bought our first house, it was $92,000 and we got our mortgage and they did the stress test. It was like, it couldn't be more than 30%. Your mortgage couldn't be more than 30% of your total income. And I mean, I can't imagine even at 30% what that would be now for a house here. The houses here in our city in Stratford, I think on average, they've come down in the past year, but on average, they're probably about $500,000 to $700,000 a house easily. I don't know where you get down payments. I don't know. I mean, our down payment for our first house was $6,000. We just borrowed it from Shannon's dad.
This is what's happening is if you're already in the market, you're fine. Like if you bought housing in the past, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But people trying to get into the market now, what's happening is those huge housing rates, those huge housing prices are getting translated into huge rent prices, which means that the people who aren't already on the property ladder can't get on it because they can't build up a down payment because everything they have is going to rent because people work hard to support their landlords' families.
Zing. I was going to say, you know how you stop
Where's that libbed up sound effect again?
Right?
Libbed up. There we go.
I was going to say, maybe if you limit people to only one additional property, then there'd be more property to go around.
There are rather many people that own multiple rental properties, income properties, and I don't have a huge issue. We don't have any income properties.
He's got like, whoa.
Just don't come for me.
Don't start. Steve and I start lurching forward.
We don't have any income properties, but if we could have, we would have. And we almost did in the middle of the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, rather, when housing prices hadn't shot up, because the housing prices like skyrocketed in 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
And we looked at a house in Nova Scotia that was a duplex, and I think it was $175,000. We're like, this is a lot of money for us, but it's a doable amount of money. We could rent out both sides. Well, the one side's being fixed up, the other side's already fixed up. That's great.
Why did you want to be a Nova Scotian landlord?
Well, because we could stay there too.
Right?
It was right on the beach.
Yeah.
It was nice. We wouldn't invite you, obviously.
Two
Lisa,
for one.
Your invite's in the mail.
Thank you.
We're busy going to Pitbull concerts.
Exactly. For those of you who missed out on that, that was just an exchange that Steve and I had on the interwebs. Dolly. And it was $175,000. And then literally in the space of, we hummed and hawed out in our back deck after probably one too many glasses of wine, and then decided, okay, let's just call the realtor. So we called the realtor and she's like, it's too late. The prices have actually like gone up. And the price of that same house, that house sold right away. The next available house was 180 or something and had gone up to over $270,000 in the space of like 24 hours. It was craziness. But I don't have a problem with people owning an income property. I do have a problem of people owning income properties that are there to gouge for rent. I don't understand that because there's so many rental properties and apartments here in town in our city, and the rents are way above what we pay and what we did pay. Our mortgage is done, but when we paid our mortgage, it's which just finished in February. Our mortgage was less than the rent would be for a one-bedroom apartment here in town, and that's for our whole house, which is craziness.
That's the problem.
I always think back to, did you ever see the series on TikTok that Millennial Moron made about like comparing Canadian real estate to real European castles?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And he'd like price out what you could buy in Toronto and it's like a crappy apartment, or you can buy this like castle in Scotland.
Yeah.
Didn't Pierre use that in one of his like, we're building the homes?
Yes.
Like, gross.
Yeah. But I think that's the problem to me is that because the rental market seems to be key to housing in general. I think that's your first step is when you're going to get a home is you're not going to walk out of your parents' house or whatever, or wherever you've come from and just sort of be like, I'm going to buy a house right away. I want to get an apartment. But I think that's almost practically impossible as well. And that, never mind getting to the point where you're in an apartment and you've got enough money to buy groceries, you've got enough money to save up for a down payment, or at least have the ability to pay back a down payment. That seems to be the biggest issue to me right now is the fact that income properties are used to gouge people for rent.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's like,
okay, that's done.
That's
Yeah.
I just remember I had a previous house that when my wife and I moved in together, I sold that previous house and we got a place together. And during the sort of transitional period, we got a sale on the previous house and we didn't have a deal closed on the new house. And so we were looking at like, well, we might need to stay in an apartment for a little bit just for the transition or whatever. I was astonished at how much money it costs for a really crappy apartment.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild. Like, a one bedroom apartment is substantially more than my mortgage payment by far. And it's just like, how can anybody break out of this system? How can anybody put a down payment together when they're paying like thousands of dollars a month for a bachelor apartment where they share a bathroom with everybody on the floor?
Ugh.
It's craziness. I mean, I think back, it was obviously a very, very long time ago, but I mean, our rent when Shannon and I moved back to Stratford was $425 a month for a one bedroom apartment. And that included electricity, I believe. It was a phenomenal deal, such a good deal that and this is no joke, even this is quite funny, is that we would have, we had one credit card at the time, which was an American Express card. It was above a pub, and our pub bill would be twice as much as our rent every month.
That's when you move.
I have
Not
numbers.
possible. The pub bill would have to be $6,000 now.
Because I'm me, I've dug up numbers. If you live in Toronto, a one bedroom
No offense, Owen
apartment,
and Gregor.
a one bedroom apartment monthly, $2,300 on average, and that's down 7% year over year. Two bedroom apartment, $2,933. Highest rents in the country, North Vancouver, one bedroom, $2,620 a month. Two bedroom apartment, $3,578.
A lot of money, man.
That's so much money. National average for a one bedroom is $1,887.
Yeah.
For two bedroom, $2,288. Three bedroom, $2,748. And that's 3% down from last year.
Like, I remember growing up when I was like much younger, you know, when you're thinking about moving out and all that kind of stuff. And like, it was like apartments were for like younger people moving out, trying to establish themselves, and then older people who wanted to downsize, right?
Sure.
Now we're in a situation where it's like, it's families, it's all sorts of people. And the rental market, like if you're renting an apartment and you're paying whatever, $1,100-$1,200, let's say, like, you know, there's amenities that you're not going to get. You may not be able to have a pet. If you have a child, then you need to get a 2-bedroom. And then if you're going to rent a house, as we've said, you're literally paying the mortgage of the people who own the house, which is fine. Like if that's where you're at, but it's a cycle that people can't get out of, because if you're paying $2,000 a month for a house and you're thinking this is a good deal, but if you owned the house and were paying a mortgage, it would be $1,800 a month. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're never going to get out of that cycle to be able to have the property that you want. And then you're at the whim of the owner of the property that you're renting from, who can give you notice and be like, hey, we're selling. Thanks. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.
But Lisa, don't landlords provide housing? You see her wither. Landlords don't provide housing, they restrict it.
Well, who provides housing then?
The people who build houses.
Yes.
Who's that?
Like construction workers, builders, plumbers, roofers.
Unless
framers.
you are a philanthropist and you are going around purchasing houses and giving them to people. Do you know what I mean? Then you're providing houses to people. Otherwise, it's a business. It's a transactional thing. right? And
It totally is.
Yeah.
And I think, as much as it's the thing goes, the market will bear what the market will bear. It's whatever price they can get is the price that they're going to set it at.
But there's a second part to that. If you are, say, a corporate landlord, a large scale landlord, you aren't going to build enough housing to drop prices because that's not in your interest.
Sure.
Right? There's always going to be a sort of sweet spot for the developers where they're like, well, if we keep building at this, we can charge this rate, and that's extraordinarily profitable. If we build more housing, our margins shrink because we can't charge as much rent. So we're just going to artificially restrict supply to keep things very expensive. And it's a really strong reason why, like, we need non-market housing, cooperatives, public housing. Like, if you think back to, like in the UK for a very long time, like, and I know people will complain about council housing, but the reality is council housing, like something like 40% of housing construction in the UK prior to Thatcher was council housing.
Yeah.
And I lived in council housing, former council housing, and it was perfectly lovely. I mean, it's not flashy. Like, you're not getting like, but it's also not like Soviet apartment blocks. It's just housing. It's just perfectly ordinary housing. Also, Soviet apartment blocks, underrated. Just saying.
That tracks.
Look, man, it moved millions of people from like living in.
Was Stalin really that bad,
Right?
man?
Damn commies coming into this.
It housed so many people. It housed so many people.
I think I do think there's an argument to be made for council housing. The problem with that, and I don't know how you deal with it, and I think it's a problem that is a solvable problem. But for example, if we use the UK example again, in Glasgow specifically, in Scotland, you had 4 subdivisions that were made for council housing outside the 4 corners of the city. And they all became essentially ghettos. They became like no one had anything. There was no other civic thought to planning beyond putting housing there. That was it. No one said, "Hey, we need to have a place for people to do stuff. We need to have them be able to shop. They have to have good places for business. They have to there needs to be community here. There needs to be stuff to do, so they don't just go around burning mattresses and that's it. Because eventually, what happened is they'd all just burnt mattresses, and you still have lots of schemes. I think anywhere, but I can think of it in England and I can think of it in Scotland, places, and certainly to a much lesser extent, but same in Canada as well, and certainly in the US, where you have these lower income housing, and it's just they've been kind of stuck there. Like that's the problem with the council housing, as opposed to post-war home building. I think in Canada, where they were like, we're going to build a community, and it's downtown or wherever it is. There you go. There's your downtown community of people. And everyone's got their own space, and you've got pride of ownership and all that kind of stuff, but it's all going to be, this is your house. This is where it's going to be. And I think we have to kind of get back to that a little bit.
So a big part of that is like NIMBYism, because when people say like, okay, the most common example is like, hey, we want to build affordable housing. Or in Regina, the example that we had was the city wanted to build a shelter, and they had a place for it. And then the neighborhood rose up and said, well, we don't want those
not in our neighborhood. Yeah.
And so the same thing happens with low income housing is if you try to build sort of mixed income neighborhoods, which you should have so that rich people aren't just siloed away from the poor people and pretend they don't exist, then the rich people freak out and are like, well, we don't want those undesirables in our neighborhood. They might take the bus, right? Like they get so mad. But they get so concerned. They're like, well, if we build stuff, people might use it. Like, oh, if we build a park, those poors might send their children.
Those poors, Jesus.
Oh, man, but it happens all the time. And it leads to a lot of economic isolation. And it leads to, like, that's the reason why so many people are, like, scared to go on the subways, because they've never had any experience with people from other income classes than them.
Well, and I think too, like, I mean, there should be, I don't know all the types of programs that exist, but I mean, like, if they explored things like having affordable housing where you have an interest in potentially buying one day, and there's a program that you sign up for where the payments that you are making towards this little townhouse or whatever it is that you're living in, so that there's a sense of potential ownership and all that stuff, and pride for the neighborhood, because we don't want, people complaining about that. But like, there's ways that you can, if you wanted to, allow people to try and get out of the cycle. I just don't know who wants to, because the developers aren't going to want to lose money. Landowners aren't going to want to lose money. Like, you know what I mean? It's that problem for people.
I have my answer that will piss off every landlord listening.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
I think that while you are renting a space, whatever equity is gained by the owner of that space, you get a 50-50 shot of. You build equity through your rental process. Whatever equity they build, you're paying for it. You should get a cut too. And that way, when your tenancy ends, you've got some cash in pocket that you can potentially go use to buy a proper, home rather than renting an apartment. Or proper home is a weird term.
No, I know what you mean.
I don't love
land,
that, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Buy a place of your own. An apartment's a proper home. It's allowed.
I don't know how I feel about that specifically, but I think there does need to be, as Lisa said as well, there needs to be some aspirational aspect to housing. There needs to be an idea of, I'm not just stuck here. I can actually use this as a step up. I can use this as a way to get ahead. And I think that the UK did that when people were allowed to buy their council houses, which was wise. I thought it was a good idea, because it's about pride of ownership. It's about pride of being home. What's house proud? That's the word. And that idea of, if you just put people somewhere and you don't give them any opportunities to get ahead, they're not going to care about getting ahead. That's when you get terrible tenants. And I'm sure there's lots of landlords who can tell I know there are lots of landlords that can tell terrible stories about clients and tenants who are just they didn't do anything to increase the equity of the property. They actually did something to decrease the value of the property. And I think that comes from the idea of not having that pride of ownership, that pride of place.
Capitalism's got you so good.
I hear what he's saying, but I'm like, I know what he's saying, and I'm like, yeah, both
got
of them.
you so good.
Like,
why do you have to own something to care about it?
Why do you have to own something to care about it? I don't know. Ask people who don't care about stuff.
Wait, you mean the people who are getting pretty consistently exploited by their landlords and building equity for them while they get no share in it?
Well, that's my point.
Why would they care about that place?
So that's my point, is that there needs to be ownership. There needs to be pride. And that pride only comes when you have a stake in the game. I think that you have to have a stake in the game. And that stake in the game might just be the fact that it's your community. But you need to feel good about that. I'm often, I'm always quoting Rudy Giuliani because I love him so much.
Noted landscaping expert.
I really choked on my own spittle. Okay.
But one of the things I've always thought was actually quite wise was himself, even though it spawned a lot of terribleness. The very tip of the idea is good. Himself and the police chief in New York, with their broken windows theory, that idea of like, if people see things are shit, they're going to act shit. If they see things are being kept up, maintained, and good, they will rise to that. They'll be like, yes, I have pride in this area. And I think a big problem with affordable housing is that we still do, is because of NIMBYism and such, we kind of just throw people in an area and be like, all right, good luck to you. And you can't do that. You have to maintain it. You have to make it nice. You have to clean out those parks and all that kind of stuff.
There are affordable, like, not far from where I live, there's always in every community, right? There's a section of more affordable housing, and they're generally little townhomes, like for families and things. And there are some that are maintained and well kept, and they've got flowers and all these things. And then there's others that are dumps, right? In my neighborhood, there are some houses that are impeccable, and then there's some houses that just don't really particularly care. Like, they'll do the bare minimum. But
I mow my lawn on occasion.
Right? Exactly. But like, if you are a landlord for affordable housing and you're banking on the fact that you're going to make profit, and there's no community relationship. So if you're just the landlord, right? And now, I mean, there's all these companies that will do it for people. So it's not even like, you're not even meeting the person that owns the property. But like, having that relationship of all like, hey, thanks for renting from me. This is what I'm going to provide you. I'm going to bring flower pots in the summer. And like, you know what I mean? That helps to build a sense of community, that you're not just, it's not just a money transaction. And then maybe that will garner people wanting to like engage more and keep things nice so that
for
the rest of the community finds
that's the heart of it.
Yeah.
Why would you care about a community that's made it very clear it doesn't care about you as anything other than a vector for profit?
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's cyclical. I mean, I think it starts on the powerful side, but it's cyclical in that the people don't care. And then the people in power go, well, these people don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So why should I care? Why should I pay for the price for that?
I'm going to be even nastier than Steve. I think the government, if you're on like in Alberta and Alberta Works or some type of benefit, I think for the money that they are providing you for rent, they should take the 5% of that and stash it away for you so that at some point when you get back on your feet, you're given that as a little best of luck and get going.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I mean. Like there's things that we can do to stop and break the cycle that is having people stay in situations that they have no hope of getting out of, that leads to all the other stuff that we're dealing with, right?
Well, and this is it. The more precarious your situation is, the more the market can take advantage of you. Right? And so there's like in the landlord renter power dynamic, like you hear landlords in the media all the time being like, oh, they wrecked up my house. And it's like, okay, sure. But like, and yeah, my heart breaks for you buying a house, charging somebody for access to it and whatever. But like, but what it comes down to is there's a
like
huge,
if you had a big house that had like 200 rooms in it and you charge people to access it, that'd be crazy.
That's a hotel.
But there's huge power differentials here. There are enormous power differentials. And I think that gets missed because if the landlord, decides to jack the price, if that person can't afford it, they're out on the street, right?
Yeah.
Like the markets have created these problems, and we can't rely on the markets to fix it, but also the markets prey on the most vulnerable people because it creates situations where people have no choice, where they've got to pay $3,000 a month for a mediocre apartment in, wherever, just in order to get by. And like, what are you going to do? Go live on the street? And lots of people are, and then they get hated for living on the street too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know that in Ontario, it was 2018, Doug Ford's essentially pulled up some of the rent protections back so that any property built after 2018 or renovated for the purpose of renting, built or renovated for the purpose of renting after 2018 was no longer regulated by how much they could charge. Mm-hmm. And it was insane. It was totally insane. Because again, the market will bear what the market will bear. But you're right. People are going to be, when you've got no choice, you're not playing the game. You're just doing whatever you can to get by. You're not saying, oh, I can afford this one. You're not even choosing that. You're the bottom of the bar has risen to such a level that it takes up all of your income, which is insanity.
Well,
and the market's created the problem and aren't going to fix it.
No, because if you're buying property, there's certain things that they have to look at, right? They have to look at what your property taxes are. They look at all these things. When you're renting property, the landlords can make up whatever price they want to make up. And if all the little landlords get together and decide this is how much we're going to charge in our little area, then you're stuck with that, right?
It's fine. We painted over the cockroaches.
Right?
The old landlord special.
We sprayed Febreze. You're okay.
So what you guys are saying is that it's entirely possible for us to build 4.8 million homes.
Oh, drop in the bucket. Easy peasy.
I think we have a lot of those homes already. I think we just need to.
Probably do. We probably do.
Yeah, I was going to say,
there's
let's be
that,
communist about it and take some and divide
also,
it up.
It doesn't exist in a bubble, right? Like we need a huge increase in the number of people working in construction, which means that we need to improve the working conditions of people in construction because people don't work in construction because it's really hard work, man.
Yeah, for sure it is.
And look I'm just going to say it, like as much as I am a leftist, I want to sell my home for the best price I can get it for, right? Like that's just how it is. But I think there's just been so much that's happened that doesn't need to happen. And we need to start looking at things differently and not just like Habitat for Humanity, which is a lovely organization and does great work. But like there's other things that we need to do, right? Because the wait times for people shouldn't be 5-10 years for them to get homes.
My plan is just to win one of those home lotteries.
Okay. You could be putting that $100 ticket. No, sorry. Because people are going to be listening to this and be like, well, if they just put away $5 a month.
Oh my
They still wouldn't be able to afford rent.
If you just put away $5 a month, and in 1,000 years,
1,000 months,
You're set.
Yeah,
Exactly. And Steve will let anyone he wants to stay in your house. Is up to that? God.
And you'll get equity.
Capitalists.
You can find past episodes and more at podcastisbroken.ca or your favorite podcast platform.